Intro. Hello, I'm Peter Landau, managing editor of newsjunkie.net, and today I have Warwick Sabin, who is the president and CEO of Deep South Today. He's also a former Democratic member of the Arkansas House of Representatives. Thank you so much for taking the time today to speak with me, Warwick.
It's my pleasure. Good to be with you, Peter.
Your career has moved among journalism, publishing, civic organizations, elected office. What connects these different chapters for you?
Well, for me, it's about service to the community and also chasing my curiosity. I originally was determined to be a journalist. I grew up in a journalism household. I'm curious about a lot of subjects. Journalism gives that opportunity to research, to be presented with a new subject that you have to learn about and figure out, and people that you have to talk to about those issues. I enjoy that exploration, that learning, and trying to convey that to other people. The public service element of journalism is very attractive to me. Over the course of my lifetime, I've come to appreciate how having access to credible information empowers people, empowers communities, enables people to solve problems. I think journalism performs that function well when it's done correctly. As I navigated through my career, I was presented opportunities to work and serve in government, as well as to be involved in nonprofit initiatives and ultimately running nonprofit organizations. And in those venues as well, it's about listening to people, collecting information, using that information and those connections to solve problems, hopefully to the betterment of community and society at large. So I feel like that's the through line in my career.
And like you said, you started in journalism. You served, if I'm correct, as the publisher of the Oxford American.
That's
And
right.
I'm just curious what that experience taught you about the difficulty of sustaining ambitious journalism in this field today.
Well, there's a long story there. I'll try to be succinct, but I started with the Oxford American as just an avid reader and subscriber and just loved the magazine so much. When it ended up in Arkansas, where I was living, because it had originally started in Oxford, Mississippi, I was excited that it was there. It went through some financial troubles, and I volunteered myself to help save it, initially by suggesting it convert to a nonprofit. This was back in 2003, and finding it a home at a university and raising some money to get it off the ground again. Several years later, they were embezzled from and they were bankrupt and in debt again. So they came to me and I volunteered to be the publisher of the magazine, although I'd never been on the business side of journalism. I did it as an unpaid volunteer until I got the magazine in good enough shape where I could quit my other job and just be the publisher, because I did enjoy it, even though it was very challenging. This was in 2008 when the country was entering a recession, when operating a print publication was really troublesome because people were trying to figure out, how do you transition to digital without losing all your advertising revenue and all your subscribers. And so it was a really sort of fraught time, but it taught me a lot. And I learned that I enjoyed the business side of journalism. We did a lot of creative and innovative things, launching events before events were popular, getting into video and actually winning a national magazine award for video the second year that category was even in existence. So that was fun. We did a lot with a little, and it's still instructive in how I run my organization today.
Unlike almost everyone I've spoken to prior to you, you have served in government, specifically in the Arkansas House of Representatives. So how did being inside the government change your understanding of what political and public service journalism gets right and what it misses?
I'm not sure it changed a lot. I was elected to the legislature while I was publisher of the magazine. And so I was coming into the legislature with a strong appreciation for the value of journalism and what it could mean to help communicate what the government is doing, but also holding elected officials accountable. My experience as an elected official, it was difficult to get attention for the work that was happening in government. That was most new and surprising to me. I thought, as a serious policy junkie, that if I had a good idea, if I had a good bill, if I was making progress on something, the newspapers and the radio and the TV, they'd want to cover it. They'd want people to be informed about it. But Media is stretched thin. It was stretched thin then. Trying to get any attention whatsoever for those kinds of issues was very, very difficult. And one of the lessons also I took from that is there's a lot of times you think that elected officials may welcome the destruction of local media because nobody's holding them accountable anymore and they can do all the corrupt things that they want to do. Interestingly, when local media erodes, oftentimes it's the elected officials, the politicians who miss it the most because there is a symbiotic relationship and they need avenues to communicate with their constituents, with the electorate, and sometimes just selfishly to brag about the work they're doing. There is interest there in keeping it alive and vibrant.
I'm curious what persuaded you to return to journalism and become, I believe you're the first president and CEO of Deep South today.
Well, to be very honest with you, it was an opportunity that was suggested to me when Deep South Today was getting started. The first thing the leadership did was recruit for a president and CEO because Deep South Today was born from two newsrooms that had similar supporters, and they came up with the sort of the idea that these two newsrooms could be supported by one centralized business entity, and they went out and looked for somebody who could get it started. And when the opportunity was presented to me, it sounded perfect because they wanted somebody who had some experience in journalism, both on the editorial and on the business side, someone who understood nonprofit management, the world of philanthropy, the South in particular, and the political dynamics here. It checked all the boxes for me. I checked all the boxes for them. And it's been a joy to do this work now when it's so critical in this region.
Deep South Today is a network of locally rooted newsrooms as opposed to one regional publication. So how is that distinction important for you?
Well, I think it's important in a lot of different ways. We are trying to do this work regionally in different states. And so my understanding is we're still the only nonprofit network of newsrooms that's in multiple states. The scale is important because where we're doing this work in the South, it's under-resourced. There's not a lot of population density. And so to achieve the same kind of efficiencies and economies of scale that you get when you're in a big city on the East or West Coast, or when you're in a place like Texas, you really need to aggregate the population. I'll just tell you right now, we're in 3 states. Mississippi has a population of 3 million. Louisiana has a population of 3 million, and Arkansas has a population of 3 million. You put that together, you get 9 million. That's like a major metro somewhere. That's a scale you need. However, because these are different states, these are different communities. They have really specific interests and identities. And we want to make sure the newsrooms are rooted in the communities, authentically connected to the communities they're serving. And so we don't try to homogenize the brands or the content. We don't tell any of the newsrooms what to publish, so they have full editorial autonomy. Yet they're all benefiting from this centralized infrastructure that makes the most of every dollar and ensures that this can be sustainable and grow.
That leads perfectly into my next question because you have Mississippi Today, the Verite News, and the Current. So you're sharing resources, but they also need to be serving their local community. So what functions are most useful to centralize, and which editorial or organization decisions should be made at the network level or made at the local level?
Yeah, to simplify it, all the editorial decisions are made at the local level. So there's no top-down dictates on what to cover or how to cover it. There are opportunities for the newsrooms to share ideas, to collaborate, and we've created a lot of capacity for the newsrooms, which I'll get to in a second. I will say what to centralize is mostly pretty intuitive because we've centralized all of our finance functions, all of our HR functions, the technology, which can get very expensive, our audience functions, which is a little more complicated because we do have a centralized effort there, but we do have dedicated audience editors in each of our newsrooms that liaise and take advantage of the centralized hub. And then the resources that we've created at the network level to support our newsrooms are things like the Deep South Today Investigative Reporting Center that we established in partnership with the New York Times that puts dedicated investigative reporters in each newsroom, alongside dedicated data reporters and local investigation fellows from the New York Times. We've created something called Deep South Today Studios, where it's really our multimedia effort. So we're making video and audio resources available to the newsrooms, but it's more about how we're serving the newsrooms versus any kind of mandate to operate or publish in a certain way.
So the current, right, that was an existing newsroom which joined the network. How do you provide greater capacity without making it feel absorbed or standardized into the Deep South mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've accomplished that. The Current joined the Deep South Today network last September. They're still called The Current. They still have the same logo, same website address. I think if you were a reader of The Current, you haven't noticed any difference in terms of how the information is conveyed to you. Same editors, same writers, same email newsletter that goes out regularly. What we have done is we've strengthened The Current in significant ways. We've basically doubled the size of their newsroom in less than a year. We helped them beyond Lafayette, Louisiana to Lake Charles, Louisiana, which means that they're basically covering most of Southwest Louisiana now. We're a stronger organization financially, much, much stronger than the Current was by itself. Their reporters and editors have gotten higher salaries. We're a unionized workforce. There's one payroll and one union across the whole organization. So the Current benefits from that. And they get all of the support from our hub, which means they can focus all of their time and energy on the reporting and the journalism. So I would say that, they get all the good and almost none of the bad.
In May of this year, you announced there's going to be an Arkansas Today.
That's right.
So why Arkansas for the next place for Deep South Today to build a newsroom?
Well, I mean, it's not a degree that I have a lot of experience and background in Arkansas, but it's also not the reason we decided to go there. I mean, it really was sort of a product of doing a lot of quantitative research in terms of landscape analysis and surveying, as well as qualitative analysis with doing listening sessions and again, kind of surveying the population, understanding what the needs in Arkansas are. The simplest way I put it is Arkansas is where Mississippi was 10 years ago when Mississippi Today got started. And Mississippi Today is our flagship newsroom. It's our largest newsroom. It started 10 years ago as the first nonprofit newsroom in the state. It's now by far the largest newsroom in the state. What was happening in Mississippi 10 years ago was that the legacy newspaper, the statewide paper, was in decline. A lot of local papers were also in decline or going out of business alongside local radio stations. There was a profound need for sources of local news and information. Since that time, the Associated Press no longer has a presence in Mississippi. So Mississippi Today has evolved to become like a wire service for all the local news outlets in Mississippi, whether they're nonprofit or commercial, because we provide all of our content for free. And that allows these other news outlets to focus their energies on their local communities and get the statewide content from us. When you look at Arkansas, it's very much the same. You have one statewide newspaper that's been in decline. You've seen a huge decline in the number and scope of the local media outlets around the state. Most profoundly in the fastest growing part of the state, which is Northwest Arkansas, which is where Walmart, Tyson, J.B. Hunt, all these big companies are headquartered. In that part of the state, you probably have the least amount of local news. And you can imagine what sort of the demand and the need is there when you've got a fast growing area that doesn't have local news. And also, Arkansas has also lost the Associated Press, just as Mississippi did. We see an opportunity to fill the gaps, to report the news that isn't being reported, to serve as a wire service for the local papers around the state, and work collaboratively with the existing media to make sure we're not duplicating efforts that are already happening, that we're filling gaps and being complementary to the ecosystem that already exists.
We're doing profiles on community-based local news organizations and how they can be sustainable and how they're filling a gap. But that sustainability at a regional nonprofit news network is difficult when you're not at a major hub with a lot of wealthy funders that can support the organization. So what is your financial equation that keeps you afloat?
Well, it's sort of a combination of things. I mean, I mentioned the scale, and I think the scale is important because, I mean, it really does reduce the per unit cost of doing journalism, but it also gives us access to more sources of revenue because as we're covering more ground, our revenue is diversified among things like institutional philanthropy that exists at the national, regional, and local levels. We have our membership, which is our kind of individual small donor revenue. It's sort of what would be akin to a subscriber, except because we're a nonprofit, we don't have a paywall. What we do is inspire individual support from people. And we also have an earned revenue strategy that's built around advertising and events and those sources of revenue. And again, you can imagine when you have a 2 or 3 state geographic footprint, it gives you access to more and different kinds of advertisers who want to reach audiences in a way that can be very bespoke. It can be very targeted, or it can be a bank that has branches in all 3 states. It allows us to reach national advertisers who think at that scale, it's worth their money to invest in advertising with us. We're able to attract more revenue, reduce expenses, and put more resources into the journalism versus the business infrastructure, which if all these newsrooms were just separate entities, they would have totally redundant infrastructure. We have one of these things to service multiple newsrooms.
I don't want to harp on this, but grants can be temporary. Funders can favor new initiatives over routine reporting. How do you build durability into that system? Is it just scale, or do you have other?
Well, I don't think anybody can perfectly solve the problem you've identified, which is a real problem. Funders can be fickle, they can change their minds, they can move on to different issues or priorities. I think it's one of those things where you're on the treadmill and you're running it nonstop, which means that you're always looking for new and additional funders. You're looking to inspire different kinds of funding from different places and different people. I don't think you can ever give up on philanthropy as a pillar of what we're building to support and sustain local journalism, because to me, that would be like a museum giving up on philanthropy, or a university giving up on philanthropy, or a performing arts institution giving up on philanthropy. These are institutions in our communities that are civic infrastructure. They're things that we all know are valuable, that need to be sustained. Nobody would tell a university, you're going to have to figure out a way to run your university without philanthropy. That's an outrageous thing to think about or demand or contemplate. People understand these are civic institutions that aren't necessarily going to be sustainable on a for-profit basis. So you look for philanthropy. Funders change their minds when it comes to all of those different kinds of civic institutions that I mentioned. So they're going to do the same thing in journalism, but it's up to us who are running these organizations to find ways to support them.
You mentioned the partnership you have with the New York Times. So they're a big national contributor to your network. What must remain under the direction of local journalisms in that relationship?
Well, we were really clear when we were setting this up, and the New York Times have been great partners with this, that this is the Deep South Today Investigative Reporting Center. It exists within our organization. The employees are our employees. The direction comes from inside. Importantly, I went out and raised the money to fund the project. The New York Times is contributing a lot to it because they have the Local Investigations Fellows program, and they put a local investigations fellow in each newsroom. They're contributing their editing time and expertise, as well as co-publishing all of the stories. You can imagine the reach that they have versus the reach we have. What they see as the benefit to them is that we're on the ground in a part of the country where they either don't have people on the ground or they have very few people on the ground. It allows them to have more depth of reporting in a place where it's hard to report. As the New York Times grows, they see the benefit in their brand being in front of more people, and we provide that for them in a part of the country where that wasn't existing. It really is a good partnership, but the content's being directed through our editors on the ground as part of our center.
I've heard a lot of collaboration with independent or community-based news organizations, which was not heard of many years ago when news was much more proprietary and people were after the scoop and wanted to avoid sharing any sort of resources with other news organizations. Before I let you go, I did want you to look in your crystal ball and talk about the 5-year plan, that will keep Deep South Today successful and touch upon what other community news organizations can do to have the reach and the success that you have had.
Help me remember the first part of your question.
Oh, your 5-year plan and maybe opening the lens to speak to other community news organizations and what you're doing right and what they could avoid mistakes you made.
Our plan is really, I mean, there's several elements to it. We want to continue to sustain and grow our existing newsrooms because there's still a lot of opportunity to do more in places like Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, in terms of not just sort of the geographic scope of our coverage within these states, but also the topical coverage, the different beats. I think, again, by creating more value for our audiences, by being available to them in more formats like video, like audio, being across multiple platforms, we can build a broader base of support and sort of signal our value to the community. We're also looking to grow geographically still. There's still other communities in the Deep South that are news deserts that we can more efficiently meet the need for local news in those areas. Increased scale will continue to keep us sustainable. We do see what we're doing as a model for what could work in other parts of the country that are similar to us, whether it's the upper Midwest or Appalachia or in the southwestern United States, where you don't have population density, you have fewer resources. So you're trying to do more with less. I would encourage everyone working in those areas to think about how existing newsrooms could come together in a network, or at the very least, share resources. It's the redundancy and the duplication of effort that makes it most difficult to sustain these entities over the long term.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate the work that you're doing. You're paving a path forward for local news, and that's a very important mission. Keep up the good work.
I appreciate you saying that. And thanks for inviting me to have this conversation.
Oh, you're welcome.